In this episode of the Data Defender Forum, we are speaking about DORA, which stands for the Digital Operational Resilience Act. It is Europe's latest regulation and applies to any financial institution serving European customers. We are joined by Laura Wu, founder of DORA Report, which helps business to simplify and automate DORA reporting. In this episode, we go over what is DORA, who should comply and when, what are the keys to compliance, and how to get started. Let's dive in. So, Laura, let's set the stage. Can you tell us what is DORA?
Sure. So DORA is the Digital Operational Resilience Act. It's an EU regulation that came into force this year in January. So this regulation came about to ensure that the financial sector within the EU is able to weather any severe operational digital disruptions. So, for example, like cyber attacks or third-party breaches, data breaches, etc. So the hope is that DORA will be able to have the smooth provisioning of financial services across the European Union, and the union can maintain the ability to preserve consumer market trust and confidence. So yeah.
Very good. So, you mentioned the financial sector, but who actually needs to pay attention to this regulation?
Yeah, so any financial entity that operates in the EU are in scope. So even if you are a global financial entity, but you have like payment processing in the EU, you will be in scope for DORA, as are any critical third-party providers to financial entities that operate within the European Union.
And, like any of these compliance journeys, there is a compliance deadline. And also, like, fine. Also, what happened? Like, when do companies need to comply and what happens if they don't?
Sure. So like DORA came into effect on the 17th of January this year. So it's already come into force. And I would say there isn't like a compliance deadline per se, but there are reporting obligations that companies have to adhere to and activities they have to demonstrate since the 17th of January. But like that said, that there are deadlines for submitting some of the required documents. So for example, incident reports, they have like associated deadlines for submission when a major incident happens. And then like this is more of like a continuous requirement. And then there's another document called the Registers of Information. And this is like a yearly obligation that companies have to submit this. And I think you have to submit it to your competent authority and they set the deadline. So this Register of Information submission should be coming actually up soon for most companies to submit. And we can explain what this is later. And on the like what happens if companies don't comply part, well, like the competent authorities, they can enforce penalties like fines. And there isn't like a maximum penalty that firms are going to be subjected to, but there's more of a periodic penalty payment, and this can be like 1% of their average daily worldwide turnover. And another implication is that the competent authority can suspend the financial entity from using certain third-party providers if they're critical. If like there's a risk that this third-party provider has had a significant data breach and they haven't done anything to address it, then they can say, well, you can't use them anymore. And this obviously can cause a lot of disruption to a financial entity, to their operations, if they don't have some alternative to move on to, like alternative third-party provider to move on to. And then there's the obvious one, which is like the reputational damage to a company. Like if you breach a regulation, the competent authority will publish this on their website about who they've imposed penalties on, and then like any other regulatory breach, the media can pick up on it, and it just doesn't like it's not very good for your reputation, especially when like consumers' money is involved, right? I'm not going to put my money in a bank where they're shown to like not have a resilient technology stack or whatnot, or significant data breaches. That's not where I'm going to put my money anyway.
I hear a lot of things that sound like GDPR. Is there a lot of differences or similarities that you can share about?
Yeah, so I mean, they're both EU regulations, for starters, but I think like although they both aim to like enhance security and like protect data, I think they're quite different in their like scope and focus. So, for example, like DORA is focused on the financial sector, but GDPR like applies to all sectors, right? It's not just financial entities. And DORA is now looking at the supply chain of these financial entities, whereas GDPR is really applies to any companies that process any data of EU citizens. Um, and I think like DORA is looking at like broadly like operational resiliency, whereas GDPR is focusing on protecting personal data and privacy rights. So I think you can say that they're both looking to ultimately protect consumers from harm. But the goals are a bit different. I think like the goal for DORA is like protecting people's money, as we said, and the GDPR is more protecting people's like data. I mean, some people might disagree on this, but like, yeah, this is like I guess my view.
So the DORA regulation is built about 5 core elements. Can you go through them?
Yes, sure. So, like, I think in a nutshell, DORA can be summarized by these key pillars, and a lot of people talk about them in this way. I guess like the first one we can talk about is like risk management. And this looks into like what is a robust risk management framework, and what's expected of financial entities to like deliver this robust framework. And then the second pillar is like around managing third party risk. So how your critical third party providers will need to be overseen, and how companies will need to start managing this risk. And I think this is a particular interesting space. And then there's incident management, which covers like the incident management processes these financial entities are required to have in place, as well as the reporting requirements for the major incidents that happen. And then there's digital operational resilience testing. It's a bit of a mouthful. And this lays out the expectations of what companies need to be testing within their company. And this should be a bit more familiar for people because, like, in your business continuity planning, which companies do, most companies do already, you will have an element of like disaster recovery testing or operational resilience testing. And then there is the fifth pillar, which is around information sharing. And this touches on like how companies can improve collaboration across financial entities and share information like cyber attacks and like what the root causes of major incidents and like how to provide an anonymous platform for these entities to like share this information. So yeah, I mean, happy to talk about dive into any of these
Yeah,
pillars.
maybe we can speak about, like, even though you can put a framework in place and strategy and action point, incident will happen. So when an incident occur, like what should businesses do according to DORA?
Yeah, so I think DORA introduces like a few new requirements for firms. So like the classic stuff is that firms are expected to establish a process to manage and classify incidents and report and how they report the incidents and cyber threats. Like this is, bread and butter incident management, which companies should already have in place, right? Um, and the reporting of like cyber threats, as they term it, is optional, but the reporting of like major incidents is not. And that's because these reports are used to help the European supervisory authorities to understand whether they need to coordinate at EU level, like a response to like an incident or a cyber attack, like whether this can propagate and impact multiple financial entities and consumers or even impact the wider financial sector. So they want to like be able to stop it if it like ripples out of control, right? So, like, yes, companies are expected to have processes in place, and the legislation like outlines like the basic stuff that they need to have in place. But the main thing that companies will have to do now is also when there is a major incident, a DORA major incident, and we can dive into classification if we want. That when they have this, they need to submit 3 reports. And the first one is an initial notification, and this needs to be submitted quite quickly, actually, within like 4 hours of when the incident has happened. And then an intermediate report, which dives into a bit more detail. So after you've like found out a bit more information about what's actually happening within your incident, and then like the third one is like the final report. So this is more akin to your post-mortem documentation or your post-incident review process. Like you can probably pull a lot of information out of that for your final report. And that's to understand like the root cause of the incident and share that with the competent authority. So yeah, these have like deadlines, and that's something at DORA Report we're working on, like to try and simplify these processes for the companies that need to submit these reports. And yeah, so like I think I just want to call out like a major DORA incident may not map to a major incident within your company of what you classify. So it's worth understanding what the nuances are, because your teams might need some training to be able to like raise a DORA incident more effectively. And yeah, if you want to know more, Rootly and DORA Report have put together like quite a detailed guide on incident management and DORA. So yeah, I recommend reading that, and I'm sure we can link that somewhere.
Well, we can certainly link the link to the report. Rootly is a AI-powered incident management platform that allows you to do a lot of what DORA is asking you to do as a company. So, companies who are impacted by this regulation should definitely check Rootly out. What's interesting, I think, in what you just said is that it's not just about protecting one business and its customer, but it's actually about protecting the European economy and all the consumer and other companies. Several years ago, there were a wave of ransomware. Bad actors were encrypting data of companies and asking for a ransom against the password. And this attack were propagating like pretty quickly.
Mhm.
So do you think like DORA is, in part like looking at preventing this type of events from happening again?
Yeah, I think so. Or at least making sure that firms are more resilient and able to like plan for these scenarios and know how to respond, but also like to build like platforms where companies can share more easily, like when this is happening. Because I think like if you're a financial entity, you're not exactly going to knock on another financial entity and be like, hey, like this is happening to me. I mean, but this way, if you are all reporting into your competent authorities and this is being funneled up to the European supervisory authorities, and they can try and like coordinate a response, and help everyone. Like if you have come up with a solution in your company, well, maybe we can apply that to another company, and hopefully involve the right people to provide support when these kind of events happen. And they will happen again. Like we live in a digital age now where unfortunately cyber attacks are not like a once in a blue moon kind of event. I think I saw a statistic the other day, like in 2023, like 78% or something of like banks had been subjected to like data breaches by their third parties. So like that's like really high number. Um, yeah.
So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
When? Yeah.
And obviously, I think like some of this channel will go under secrecy, and some of this information, may not be shared with the public. But I like the idea of like someone getting attacked and say, "Hey, this is what we are facing, and this is how we solved it," or "Hey, like we are struggling to solve it," and involving, a broader help. I think it makes a lot of sense for the European economy and the consumer, and in general,
Mm.
I think all the good actors. So for listeners who, are listening to this and they're like, dang, it sounds like we have to comply with DORA. What's your advice on getting started?
Yeah, I mean, like first, I think like if you don't know whether DORA applies to you already, like tech, there are around 20 different types of financial entities that DORA applies to. So this is like from crypto asset providers to investment firms to like insurance companies. Um, and also the critical third party providers to these entities. So like we can provide a link of where you can like check whether this applies, like because you might not be in scope, especially if you're like a micro enterprise. There's quite a few exceptions. So check before you start like going, oh no, I need to like do all of these compliance checks. Um, and like I think if you are a third party, it may be a bit more challenging. For example, like if your financial entity that you're working with hasn't reached out to you yet, then maybe reach out to them, because the contractual clauses will have to shift to make sure that you are compliant to DORA, and like things like financial entities will need to understand what the exit strategies are to work with these suppliers. So yeah, if your financial entities haven't reached out to you, then reach out to them to start figuring out a plan forward. Like I heard a talk like the other day, and I think N26, the bank, the fintech from Germany, they were talking about how they were working with their suppliers. They were saying some of their suppliers are not, like DORA compliant necessarily, but they have been trying to help them, like become DORA compliant so they can still keep working together. So I think that's a really like nice approach, right? They're not going, "Oh, no, we're not going to use you," but they're going like, okay, we can, raise the bar together and we'll become, you know, more operationally compliant. And yeah, that was pretty cool. Um, yeah, and I think, like, also, like, building a relationship with the competent authorities in different regions that you operate in is probably something that you should do because, for example, if you're a big company like Cloudflare and you have an outage, which has happened in the past, like, you may operate across a load of countries and you have to report to different competent authorities. And there's something we didn't touch on, but there's, like, aggregate reporting that third parties can do as well. And they will need to figure out how they file these in every region. And the last thing you want is that when this happens to you, you have like 4 hours to figure out like who to submit to. I don't think that's going to work very well. So like, yeah, I'd say like reach out to the competent authorities in advance and like understand what their processes are. Like the Central Bank of Ireland may have a portal that you upload to, but in Italy you may have to email everything across, like it could be quite different. So I think that's like one way that critical third parties can prepare in terms of like incident reporting. And then everything else, like it will depend on the maturity of a company, right? So like bigger banks and institutions, you might already have like operational resilience testing as part of your bread and butter work. Whereas a smaller company might be like, oh my God, I can't fulfill all of these. I don't know what my critical functions are necessarily, right? And that can take a lot of time to figure out. Like I've worked in places where, if you haven't decided what your critical functions are, critical scenarios are from the start, and you have to remap these and then understand what service providers are underneath, it's a big piece of work. And so yeah, I mean, I think yeah, it depends on the level of maturity of organization and how much, I guess, resources you have dedicated, whether you have a massive compliance team and a chief risk officer who's like really on top of it, or you're like a smaller insurer, medium-sized firm and don't have many people, then you might look to using more like SaaS tools like that can help, get you to where you need to be, or like, I don't know, hiring some consultants in to help you. So I think it really depends. Um,
That's the beauty of the European fragmentation where, you would wish that you could report to one authority for all countries, but no, it sounds similar to the EU AI Act, where it's like the same thing, and like you have a different. The regulation is the same in practice, but then we have specificities per countries.
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting. There is talk of whether they want to build like a hub for reporting, right? And I think some of the financial working groups are in favor of this hub, and they published a paper describing like the pros and cons and the cost of building up this hub, a centralized place to submit. But I think right now, this is for incident reporting and probably for other things as well. But I think they are waiting to see like the volume of incidents and like how complicated is this going to be? How much double reporting are they going to get? Like I said, if Cloudflare needs to submit to like 5 different places, I mean, there's a lot of duplicate reporting that they need to do and data validation. So like, yeah, if this hub comes into play, I think it might be a bit easier. um, for yeah.
Yeah, I think for as you say, like for third parties, like if you are an API based service and you couldn't be used by like pretty much all the countries in the EU, like there can be a lot of work. Automation here, as you say, preparation is going to be key. You don't want to figure this out when the event is happening. It's just impossible to handle it.
Yeah.
So Dora, if people want to learn more about Dora, find you on the internet, where can they go?
Yeah, so yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name's Laura Wu, and we can provide the link. Yeah, or pop an email to me, and we can provide my email address as well. Happy to answer any questions, or if you disagree with anything I've just said, please reach out as well.
Super. Thank you for coming, Laura.
Thanks, Elaine.